I don't think I need to do a talk now.
Right?
How are you?
Good.
How are you really? Okay. How do you feel about the subject of discovery this morning? Death as my advisor.
Great.
Pretty powerful stuff, can be. Some of you might be embracing that whole idea, that discussion. Some of you might be avoiding that. There's some fear around that, right? That's okay. Wherever you are with it is exactly where you're supposed to be. But my intention today is to move you, possibly. A new perception, perhaps. Seeing something with a new pair of eyes. Maybe even shift your consciousness about death and dying, about physical dying, about metaphysical dying. What is that? But what I'd like to do is share some of the most impactful parts of the book and the chapter, the practice, the 8th practice on Death as My Advisor from Brummett. And then I'd like to share some of my experiences with death, if that's okay with you. Okay. I'd like to talk to you about how death, every day I deal with death and how that has impacted my life forevermore. But first, a little bit about me. I'm a mother of 3 boys. I have 8 grandchildren. They're my greatest accomplishments. I don't think I had a lot to do with that, but I'm sure there's more to come, actually. And I've been a member at Unity for more than 11 years. As Barb said, I served as chaplain for about 5 of those. Served all of you on the board. And I was a nurse for over 20 years, OBGYN. I helped babies birth into this world. Now I am the spiritual care advisor, chaplain, and grief support specialist for Hospice Advantage. I help people birth their way out. And it truly is a full circle of birthing. We birth in and we birth out. And it's been my experience that these babies, they really don't want to come in. I mean, think about it. I mean, there's a vibration here. Think about where they're coming from. And they're coming into this vibration. We turn them, we turn the breech babies that are upside down. We induce mothers who aren't going into labor. We do C-sections to get these babies out. And they just don't want to come. But where we go back from where we came from. That is a different vibration. And it is also my experience that it is easier birthing out than it is birthing in. So I'll talk a little bit about that more. But I want to honor some of the teachings of Brummett in Living Originally. He talks about, in the very beginning of this chapter, he talks about Carlos Castaneda. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with him. He's an amazing mentor, spiritual mentor and leader for many folks. But Castaneda, when he was a young graduate student, he journeyed to Mexico in the 60s to do a research project on psychedelic plants, and he came across a gentleman named Don Juan Matus. He was a Indian sorcerer, and he introduced Castaneda to a world far beyond his understanding. And part of that was teaching him about death and dying. He says, death is our eternal companion. It is always at our left at an arm's length. It has always been watching you. It always will until the day it taps you. He goes on to say, the thing to do when you're impatient is to turn to your left and ask advice of your death. An immense amount of pettiness is dropped. Can you imagine that? If you catch a glimpse of it, or if you feel like your companion is watching you, an immense amount of pettiness is dropped. Carlos goes on to talk about death as the advisor, and he says, death is the only advisor that we have. Whenever you feel that everything is going wrong and you're about to be annihilated, turn to your death and ask if this is so, and death will tell you you are wrong. Death will tell you that nothing matters outside of its touch. Nothing matters outside of the touch of death. You know, we try to deny death. We can't completely deny death. We use the D word. We avoid the D word. We are passing on, or we've gone to a better place. We've gone to the light. We've made our transition. We're off with the Lord. But in my daily experience, I work with patients and families, and we talk about dying every day. We talk about the difference between the dying process, which is painless and natural. Dying doesn't hurt. Disease hurts. And depending on what your disease process is, depends on your amount of pain. And in in hospice, that's what we do, care, comfort, and compassion for the whole family, and keeping people comfortable so that they can move through that transition in a new way, educating families that dying is natural. We are born knowing how to die at a cell level. We know exactly how to do it. It's the humanness that interrupts the process and causes havoc. So we allow that to happen. So we talk about dying a lot, daily. Barb spoke a couple weeks ago about chaos, dancing with chaos. Well, death is the ultimate form of chaos. It is the greatest of the unknown. It is the ultimate experience beyond our control, and therefore, it is our greatest avoidance. You know, and no matter where we are in our spiritual growth, we talk about this body, this vessel that we have, and when we die physically, our spirit, our soul, goes on and on and on. But yet, when you get too close to the conversation of death, innately, we still avoid it. Robert Masters is an author. He refers to this as spiritual bypass. I like that. You know, we do that a lot in a lot of aspects of our life. That's okay. It's part of the process. It's part of our journey toward enlightenment. He also talks a lot about ego. And in Unity, we talk about ego as edging God out. He says to the ego, death is the ultimate enemy. The soul seeking freedom, death is the ultimate advisor. And he reminds us what Don Juan said, whenever you feel that everything is going wrong and you're about to be annihilated, turn to your death and ask if this is so, and death will tell you, no. Nothing really matters outside of the touch of death. I would invite you to think about death as your advisor, experiences in your life, not just talking about near-death experiences that are physical, but metaphysical death. I invite you to make a list of all of the worries, the cares, concerns, issues, the problems that you think may be in the way of your life as you would like to see it. And as you write those down and you look at that, you know that you have 3 days to live. How many of those would really appear to be problems for you? What would that look like? What would be most important to you if you knew you only had a few days to live? This simple exercise could give you a glimpse at how powerful a teacher death as your companion, as your advisor might be. I'm going to leave you with in the book, this part of the book, he talks about there were 30 friends. Now, I love this. Think about this. I would love to teach this. I'd love to do this experiment. So if there's anybody who's interested, let me know. There were 30 friends. They did an experimental year. They were very committed. They had this project. They imagined that they only had 1 year to live. They declared a hypothetical death day from the day that they were presently doing this project. And then they all had the assignment to do a mock memorial service that they would present to each one 1 year down the road on that death day. They met every month, every 30 days, and at the end of each meeting, they would discuss what the next focus would be for the next meeting. You know, topics like, you know, what they feared most about death, what legacy did they want to leave back for humanity? What was left unfinished? What did they want to start? What did they want their obituary, their epitaph to say? Who would say it? This exercise was far from an exercise in morbidity. Everyone was transformed. Their lives were transformed. They found themselves living each day at a very profound depth with a new insight on gratitude. They became crystal clear about their priorities and their values. They left nothing for granted, and they left nothing unfinished. They embraced every facet of their life, and they released every facet of their life. They let everything go. Death became their advisor, their constant companion, and their lives were transformed. They were changed forever. They never went back to the way they lived prior to that year. They let go of everything. Jesus said to his disciples, leave everything behind and follow the way. Leave everything behind. That wasn't just material possessions. Leave everything. Everything you have, everything you know, everything that you believe yourself to be, leave it behind. I think this is a pretty good definition of death. Metaphysical death. Think about it. We come here, we talk about spiritual beings that we are living this human experience. We come here to evolve our soul. Do we not? True or not true? We come here to evolve. We're moving, no matter what level we are all at, we're moving toward enlightenment at our own pace. What is that enlightenment? I'm here to tell you that enlightenment, true spiritual enlightenment, is hours or days just before we make our physical transition from this world. What are you afraid of? Every single one of us are moving toward that enlightenment, moving back to that which we came. Why am I talking about this? Well, when I was a little girl, I used to see things. I used to talk to people who were there that no one else could see, but I thought that everybody else saw the same things that I saw. I thought we were all that way. When I was around 10 years old, it became to be a problem. People were bringing it to my parents' attention, and I was asked to hold back. I was asked to kind of push that away. I was afraid. I thought maybe I was going to, in the movies back when we were kids, I'm going to date myself, say 40-some years ago, the insane asylums, the black and white movies, the hospitals, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that kind of thing. That's what I thought of, and I thought, oh my God, I gotta stop. You guys, you have to leave me alone, stop talking to me. So years went by. When I was 17, actually when I was 16, I started to work in a nursing home. I've been doing caregiving, I guess, most of my life. And when I was 17, I recall this day like it was this morning. I was late for work, and we had to punch the clock. It was 4:03, and I punched the clock, and I turned over to put my time card in the rack, and my sister was standing there, in spirit. And I was really confused because it hadn't happened to me before, because I had just spent 2 days earlier, spent the weekend with her. I was babysitting my nephews. But there was this penetration, there was something pulling me to her, and she looked at me and she said, Debbie, don't ever forsake your gifts again. And she dissipated. Now, I was a little preoccupied with this, and I had to go and do my thing. I think I was folding diapers or something. I worked in this nursing home, and I heard my name over the overhead. And I went up to the desk, the nurse's station, and there was a phone call for me. And it was my mom. And she said, Deb, Charlene just died in a car accident. She, in her death, appeared to me to advise me, Deb, as my advisor. I don't know that I was really thinking of it in that way at the time. But from that moment on, I decided to be free and to allow myself to be who I was and to allow it to come in. However, we all know that you have to be in certain circles to be able to talk about things. I wasn't like I was out there with it, but I allowed it. Went to college, went into nursing, got married, had kids. My youngest son, Devin, who's 22 now, was born really, really ill. In fact, just before he turned 5, he had a liver transplant. So he was really sick up until that point, a lot of surgeries. In fact, he had well over 40 surgeries. I stopped journaling them because it was painful for me at the time. But there was a time that passed, maybe a few years. He was around 8 years old, and he was diagnosed with lymphoma, post-liver transplant lymphoma, which happens when you're immune suppressed so that you don't reject your organ. So he had been given the gift of life in the form of being a recipient for an organ, so there was going to be no radiation or chemo, which we were very happy not to have those conversations. And in fact, it was decided that we would do alternative healing. We were doing a lot of different things, but a lot of hands-on healing, energy work. My kids kind of knew about chakras and going to sleep with the colors. And so I was sitting down one day and I was explaining to Devin that they're promising him there would not be another surgery. But, however, this is what we're going to do. And it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to really focus, but you don't understand how powerful you are inside, what you can do. And I'm going to help you. And he said, Mom, like he still does, Mom. And he put his hand on my face and he said, it's okay, Mom. I came here sick, so I didn't have to be here very long. And I said, what? And then I couldn't talk. I remember, and now I know why, because I wasn't supposed to. But I was weeping, silently weeping, and he said, I'm waiting for you to be who you're supposed to be. And then he said, I took my T cells and I put them in bubbles of light of periwinkle and fuchsia. What kid knows periwinkle these days? And I put them in gold dust and put them up into the universe as love for someone else to have. And my kid didn't talk like this. I knew in that moment that Spirit was working through us. Nothing was happening to me, it was happening through me. And then the moment ended and he went on. But my life was totally changed from that moment because death, as my advisor in a new way, my humanness came into play, and I was scared to death. I said, oh my God, if I follow my truth, if I follow my vision, if I speak my truth and I grow and I go on this path, he's going to die. He's going to leave me. I can't do that. So I stopped again. Stopped everything. I'm in my 30s at this point. I stopped everything. It was the worst year of my life because it was so unnatural, and Spirit was screaming to me in a sweet voice, but screaming to me every day, what are you doing? Go, move, move. And then one day I walked through these doors, and it's not a cliche. So many of us say, I felt like I was at home. All of a sudden, the guard went down, and I knew that I could share what I was feeling, and I could open up, and I could start to move again. And I did. I started to move again. Then we had another kind of a sweet spot where there was a few years, a few surgeries, but nothing too traumatic. And then Devin needed another surgery, and this was going to be a really long one. He was about 11. So he was in surgery, and I went out to the St. Mary's Peace Garden. We were down at the Mayo in Rochester, and there was this beautiful peace garden. It was August, it was hot. It was beautiful, and I sat down, and I closed my eyes, and I was just absorbing the sun, and I was going to reconnect myself and go back to source and do what I needed to do in that moment and breathe. And my eyes were closed, and all of a sudden, it wasn't like the sun. You know when the sun is shining through your eyelids and it kind of hurts? It wasn't that. It changed color. It was white. And it didn't bother me at all, but I couldn't open my eyes. I knew I was awake, and I kept moving toward this light, and I knew that I was moving, but I felt like I was it. And then I realized that I was having this experience, and the light started to change form. I got closer, and there was this incredibly huge, beautiful angel hovering over this tree. And it was a tree of light, but it was liquid. Just imagine it. It was this liquid tree, and there were these discs hanging off of it. And my medical background always tells me to describe it as a red blood cell with a concave in it. But they were pink, like fuchsia, and they were hanging there. And this angel took my hand, and she put it through the disc, and I felt the most incredible love that you can't even explain it. I feel so loved in this life, but there's nothing like it. I was everything and I was nothing all at the same time. I felt like I was there for hours, and I looked down to the right of me, and there was this little person, this figure in a white robe that had this kind of veil on it. And they turned, and as they looked up, the veil fell off, and it was Devin. And he smiled, and I smiled at him, and he took my finger, kind of like BT thing, and he said, now go. And I opened my eyes, and I was in the garden. I was so hot. I was sweating. It was August. I was sitting in the sun. So I went inside, and I went back up to the waiting area, waiting for the surgeon to come out. And he came out, and he said, everything's going to be okay. He goes, but I have to tell you that we lost him. It was only about a minute, and he had oxygen, but we had to restart his heart and bring him back. I said, of course you did. So a couple days later, while he was recovering, we were laying in bed and talking, and I was telling him about this daydream that I had while he was in surgery. Talked about the tree and the angel, and then I went to say there was this little person sitting at my feet, and he goes, I know, Mom, I know, I was there in your dream. I knew in that moment that that was real, and that where we go, that is enlightenment, that is beautiful, that there is no fear, there was nothing, there was so much love that the fear did subside. There's another realm, like I talked about, preparing you in the meditation. So my mom went into hospice. How did I get in hospice? My mom was in hospice, and she kept telling me while she was there, Debbie, you got to do something. You got to do something in hospice. And I'm like, Mom, I can't even get my head around your hospice. Give me a minute. The day after she made her transition, died, she came to me in 3 different ways. And I said, okay, I get it. but I'm not. I'm not going to reach for it or search for it. It's going to show up. It's going to unfold exactly as it should. And it did. And so now I get to use my gifts of sight. I get right up in bed with them. I hold them. And if I'm touching them and close my eyes, I can see the door. I can see where they're walking toward. I can see the people, the dogs, the cats. There are beings there, souls waiting for them. That's all they have been meant to do in this entire universe, is bring them along that journey. Educating families to have a new experience about dying, because dying is natural, it's whole. We know exactly how to do it, and it's the most important thing that we do till we come here and we move back. That's the gift. That's the gift, is knowing where we're going. So embracing our mortality makes every moment extraordinary. It quickens our being. It opens us up more than almost anything else can. Because the truth is, the more we bow down to death, the more alive we become. I would ask you to forget what you were told before you get too old. And I will show you a garden of life that bursts into light and life, life after life after life after life. May the love and the light and the transformation and me honor and greet and meet